That's recording. Video's recording. Meetings recording. Backup audio's recording. Phenomenal. Hi, I'm Scott Manley Hadley, also known as Solid Bold, though not today. What you're about to enjoy is an interview I recently conducted with a North Carolinian writer and criminal defense attorney named Frank ABRAMS. He's recently published a novel called The COCKFIGHT, which explores criminal and justicial injustices. It is a novel rather than a journalistic piece. And we discuss in detail the ways in which the various stories that the characters in the novel tell about themselves and their lives are based on real life, and sort of Frank's experience and knowledge of that professionally. It's a really fascinating conversation, looking at the ways in which injustice is baked into the justice system, and the ways in which Frank believes we can and should be thinking about these things as we move into the future. It's a really fascinating conversation. I'm very privileged to have got the opportunity to speak with Frank, and hopefully you'll enjoy too a lot of what he had to say. It's not always hopeful, to be honest with you, but it's always articulate, it's always interesting, and it's always important to know, the way these things work. Thanks so much. Enjoy.
My name is Frank ABRAMS, and I am author of The COCKFIGHT, which is a book about injustice, redemption, a rooster, and a love story.
Amazing. And how long did you spend working on the book? Was it something that was in your mind for a long time, or was it a nice quick project?
Well, about 12 years ago, I started writing it after I had learned that there was a Kentucky crime lab that was mishandling DNA results. You see, Scott, I'm a federal and state criminal defense attorney for 38 years, and I mainly represent the poor and indigent, people who can't afford attorneys. So I thought to myself, what could go wrong here? Mishandling DNA. And quite frankly, quite a lot can go wrong, as you see from the book. And this is my second book. My first book was called Miami, A Survivor's Tale, which was a story about how Miami changed over the years. So I wrote it, I sketched it out, and people loved it. Actually, 3 publishers wanted my book, but I decided to publish it myself this time around. I would sit in court and I'd scribble it out as I'm sitting in court waiting to be called. And finally I said, it's time to finish this book.
Amazing.
Yeah. By the way, I think I picked the right time, because as you saw from a link I sent you, about a month ago, a Kentucky crime lab analyst was arrested for mishandling DNA evidence. So,
I mean, it's a terrible thing to do. I mean, I read through that article you sent, and it very much it wasn't an accident. It seemed very much to be quite intentional. That's sort of an assault on justice, really. It's I mean, when people say DNA evidence, right? Most people presume that's an open and shut case. If there's DNA evidence, it's there's not much room for debate. That's sort of the public consciousness idea of it. But it's obviously with everything with the justice system, right? It's far more nuanced than that.
They call it the CSI effect, and what it is that people, when they're sitting there in trials, are waiting for this great evidence to come forward from the expert, and that's it, open and shut. And therein lies the problem, because that's not the way the world works, not at all.
Yeah, amazing. And why did you choose to have this career? What sort of led you to your role in the?
Well, I'm from a family of journalists and writers. My older brother Mike is a retired professor of journalism. My brother Rick was an award-winning writer, journalist, and writer. And so I asked my brother Rick one day, I said, because I was writing for my college newspapers, people seemed to like it, what I wrote. And I said, how much you making at the old Miami News? I said, $150 a week. And he smiled. And I said, I better become a lawyer.
Very nice.
Well, now after all this time, Scott, I'm back to writing again.
Oh, I think a lot of people do that, right? Sort of they come full circle to when once you have the time to do that, sort of maybe a little later in life, you can come back to the hobbies and the arts and things like that, right?
It's in my blood. It's always been in my blood.
Amazing. And your previous book, was that a novel as well, or was that
that was actually a true story? That was about how Miami changed basically, and all the chaos that occurred in that particular town. They loved my book in every city I went. I got on some public radio stations, but when I went there to Miami to tell them about the book, they didn't like it so much. As it turns out, I learned something. You can't write a book about a city, tell them how rotten they are, and expect them to like it. I think it has something to do about property values going way down, or something like that, I was told.
I don't know. I think in the UK we all hate where we live. You know, I think books about how horrible London is sell very well in London. It's different mindset, maybe. Why did you choose fiction for this project rather than sort of either memoirs about sort of cases you've worked with, or something more tied to real life?
Okay, well, that is actually a great question. And the reason I chose fiction was because I could bring in more scenarios, more examples of injustice. In this case, injustice and problems with the legal system that you would not expect to see in one particular case. The other issue is, and you had kind of pegged it in your questionnaire, is that can you really write about real life situations? And that becomes kind of problematic, because unless you have the permission of the individual you have represented and they're all for it, and you're not looked upon as, in some states they don't like it at all, because they feel that you may be exploiting the individual for your own profit. Yeah, it becomes a big issue. So I thought that fiction was a much better tool to use in this particular situation.
Amazing. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Obviously, just there are so many examples, really, of people who are victims of injustice in the novel. I don't know if do you want to talk about the sort of the overall narrative? Do you want me to sort of summarize just before we get into a bit more detail?
Well, I'll say it a little bit, and first I'll tell you what. Why don't you summarize, and then I'll talk about it a little bit.
Right. So sort of the key ideas really is a group of friends, mostly who are sort of living unhoused underneath a bridge in Miami, and everyone sort of chapter by chapter we see the different histories that have led people to that position, and there are some positive stories as people find ways to sort of reclaim sort of the reputations they lost due to sort of very unfair practices, and there are also a few tragedies and people who aren't able to escape from the injustices that they've happened. And I think so there's a really interesting balance of hope and a lack of it in the novel that I think does speak to reality, right? Because some people do and have a happy ending, but lots of people don't.
Well, that sounds like a great book. I think I'm going to go ahead and buy it. Well, just adding a few things on there. Life is not cut and dry. Okay, it's not and in the legal system, people think, oh, guilty, innocent, bingo, and that's the end of it. People's lives are affected. And in the Cockfight, I chose a Teacher of the Year because I thought, what would be a bigger fall than someone who was in that situation, losing everything he has and living homeless under a bridge with various homeless people. And by taking that particular angle on the book, what I was able to do, I was able to draw in all of these other individuals who had also, in many cases, either suffered injustice or were in the process of suffering injustice. And then in there, I decided to throw in the one-legged priest. And I said, well, we've got to have somebody here who's going to try to make sense of it, at least from his angle.
Mm-hmm.
And the basic sense that he's making is, wait a second, this isn't right. The
Mm-hmm.
way people are being treated, this isn't morally, biblically, or any other way. It isn't. It isn't right.
Yeah.
And he's trying his best to let everybody know that things are wrong, but that they have to have a good attitude. It's attitude that matters. While all at the same time, they're participating, not the one-legged priest, because he doesn't like this sort of stuff, but they're all participating in cockfights. You see? Because the whole message is that in the system, Scott, they treat people like animals. They make them mean and angry towards each other, and they make money in the whole process. Because in the end, that's the least that's the common denominator there. The common denominator is money.
Mm-hmm. No, that's true. And the cockfighting you mentioned, there is a lot of literal cockfights in the book too. It's all very evocative, especially the very first time you describe it. It feels very exciting, very very real, very bloody. Is that have you been to a cockfight yourself, or is it all from the imagination?
Well, I'm going to tell you the answer to that question. My brother Rick, who passed away unfortunately of skin cancer, he was only 47, had done a story about cockfighting. They sent him the old Miami News back when it was quasi kind of illegal down in South Florida. Now it's of course all illegal everywhere. But I remember we had many discussions about how horrible and rotten a sport it was. And then although I'm not going to discuss it, but I did see some videos. So, you get the picture. And I had to do my research too. I had to learn all about the history of cockfighting and people like Judge Lacey and his famous two-toed cock, so where am I going to learn? I have to learn these things. Yeah.
Is there still quite a bit of it going on? Sort of, obviously not out in the open, but is there still quite a bit of it?
Oh yeah. I as an attorney, I hear about it, and oh yeah, and depending on where you are, north in the South, places like North Carolina, Tennessee, I'm told, and other states. Oh yeah, Texas.
Yeah. The amount of money that people are betting on it, I think is that's sort of true. That's the people are putting tens of thousands of pounds on these fights.
Oh yeah. I spoke to a lawyer. I won't mention his name, but I spoke to a lawyer. He said years ago he had gone and made a lot of money. There is a lot of money to be made in these matches, apparently. And in one of my scenes, I had, in fact, early on, one of the characters discusses how the police broke up a cockfight. Basically, everybody ran and they took all the money. And that is an actual reality. That happens too.
Nice. So I mean, obviously, there's a lot of different stories, different narratives sort of threading through the novel. Is almost everything in there obviously not identical to real life, but everything is inspired by things you've witnessed or you've heard about. Obviously, we've already mentioned the DNA evidence, that Kentucky lab, and one of the other things that I flagged was the one of the characters has false charges of criminal conspiracy because he has small drugs possession charges. Is that something that happens? People stacking these charges that are very, very minor and turning them into a big deal. Does that happen quite a lot?
Well, I have like boxes of files around my office that have those exact scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
It is exactly 100% real.
Mm-hmm. And why do you think that happens? Because of the more prisoners, the more money the prison gets? Is it just as simple as that?
Yeah, I believe it is. Mm-hmm. I believe that's the common denominator, in my honest feeling. That's the way the system works. You see, it's like this. The more people you put in jail, the more money. You know what? They're firing a lot of people across this country right now. I know a lot of federal workers. But the good news is there's job advertisements at prisons across the country. Come make a great living being a prison guard. And all these little towns, as I discussed, they put these prisons in there and these little towns, and then they basically stock them full of people. Mm-hmm. And America has what? More than 5 times as many prisoners per capita than any other country, the so-called freest country in the world. It's a business, and it is a lucrative business.
Yeah, and I mean, you do write about that in the book and how small towns, it's a huge amount of jobs, there's a huge amount of investment, just constructing the facility to start with, as well as, I mean, and prisons don't really shut down, right? They tend to keep going for a very long time.
Not only they're not shut down, there's a big movement now, of course, to privatize jails. Mm-hmm. Can you imagine what could go wrong there? I'm stuck in a corporate prison and I can't get released because the judge has no jurisdiction. Mm-hmm. And I actually wrote a short story about that I'm considering turning into a full-length novel about somebody stuck in a private jail. But yeah. Big money, big time. And these are towns that haven't made money since cotton was king. Yeah. And I think in my book, one of the best quotes I came up with was when Teach is explaining this, having been in one particular jail in South Carolina, Preach laments and says, social welfare at the expense of human bondage. How pitiful is the state of human existence. Mm-hmm. I mean, Scott, how much lower can you go? I can't even imagine.
No, I mean, I think also something that you do come back to repeatedly in the book is the idea that the punishment doesn't end when the person's out of prison.
Well, Scott, I want you to think about this. In the old days, we lament because they would take these people who were accused of crimes and they'd put them in the stocks, and they'd be there for about maybe a day, 2 days. People would come by and say, oh, look at that horrible criminal. He's in the stocks. Then they'd release them from the stocks. I'm talking about probably 1700, 1600. And even the early 1800s, they'd be released from the stocks. And that's it. That's the end of it. Maybe they'd have some issues regarding their physical treatment, which is horrible, but that was the end of it. Now you're put in a list on a computer. The police, whenever they encounter you, they type up your name or your face is recognized through facial recognition, and they know immediately what your record is. Mm-hmm. You're much more likely to be arrested again in the system. You won't get a job. Once you're on something like the sex offender registry, you might as well kiss it goodbye. Yeah. It's just a horrendous system. And you see, that to me flies in the face of what justice is all about. It's the same as a bill of attainder declaring a class of people as criminals. In a sense, you are now declared a criminal, and that is the end of your career.
One of the things you mentioned in the book is the Julia Tuttle sex offenders colony, where lots of people on the sex offenders register live together underneath a bridge. They form a community, and it's something that the system knows about. Is that a real thing? Is that similar to a real thing that ends up happening?
It was until they closed it down a few years ago after enough people got upset. It had been all over the news. What it was if you were a sex offender, a convicted sex offender, you couldn't live within so many feet of schools or parks. And the only place that basically met that definition was under the Julia Tuttle Bridge. So they started putting sex offenders living under the bridge in this horrible and violent place until there were literally hundreds of people under this bridge. And I like to joke that they named it after one of the founders of Miami, Julia Tuttle. I mean, what an honor. I mean, what an honor to name a bridge and then a sex offender colony after the founder of your city. And to me, it kind of denoted everything that what I felt Miami was all about. Finally, I think enough people got upset, and then they changed that situation there.
Just wanted to talk a bit more about the structure of the book. It's all constructed in very short chapters, which means it's a real breeze to read. Like there's a change of pace. It's really well paced. It's really energetic. I wanted to ask why you wanted to sort of make a book like that rather than these 20-30 page long chapters that you often find, particularly in novels that are about the legal system, right? There's an idea that they often have a very long in each scene, but this is nice and breezy. Why did you go for that?
Well, that's an art too. I wanted to keep it short and simple, and it's like I tell people I didn't want to use $10 words either, because the attention span of people these days isn't that long. So I don't write like this, Scott. I don't write like, oh, the wind blew through the leaves as the glistening dew dripped moistly from the. I don't write like that. I get to the point, and the way I look at it is this: and not only are people's attention span short, I want to get the message across as quickly as I can without mincing words.
And would you say the message of the book for you is as important as the story, or possibly even more so?
I think they're both. I think the message is the what is it they say? The media is the message. The message is the media. It's as important as the story. More important. It's more than a story. It's a message. And people say to me, and they come up to me and they say, "This is a great book." People just don't write like this. They don't write these stories. But Scott, after 38 years of being part of a system that isn't getting any better, it's only getting worse. I could not live with myself if I did not write this book.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I can imagine it must have quite a psychological toll on you, right? Sort of interact. Lots of these people you'd have been working with are people at really desperate moments, really dark moments of their life. Was that something that you ever found difficult, sort of in your career?
Well, it can't. Well, I do it, and I do the best job that I can. We're supposed to represent our clients competently and do the best job we can for them. But sometimes I feel like a surgeon. I say, well, we got to take this part out, or we've got to do this. But it's not going to be the same. Nothing is going to be perfect, and that therein lies the problem. sometimes you just got to do what you got to do. And I've been here for 38 years. I've made a difference. I'd like to think I've made a difference. I've had some interesting cases in my career, but it's always an uphill battle, always.
Why do you think that people are set up to lose their cases? I suppose that's the you do mention in the book, right, that people are presumed guilty as soon as they're charged.
Well, the answer is that the way the system is set up, you have a defense attorney and a prosecutor are all supposed to go to war with each other. So the system is antagonistic. It's basically each side is expected to fight as hard as they can, but the person who is caught in the middle, those who are charged, they are just fodder for this meat grinder. And the I'm not an expert, and I all I know is this: I am an expert in some things, but what I mean to say is, in regards to changing the system and how to make it, I know that as it exists now, I don't believe it's working. I think there's too many casualties in the system. They say that if one innocent person goes to jail, it's wrong. That it's better that 25 guilty people go free than one innocent person goes to jail. And I subscribe, but I think it's a difference altogether. I think the whole system needs to be changed to where people get together, and instead of being antagonistic and fighting and making the system that way, that they make a system where people get together and they say, what is the best thing to do under this set of circumstances? And, it's funny because it transcends politics. Everybody, it's like, whose ox is being gored, but it seems to be that everyone seems to feel that the system is unfair towards them in one way or another, but nobody is taking the time to say, how can we make the system better?
Do you think that's a lot of people, it's too difficult to change? It's almost inconceivable that there's everything so ingrained in these patterns, in these systems, these institutions.
Well, you know what? That's why I wrote my book as simple as I could. I sort of tried to explain it in the simplest way, Scott, because things are complicated. But in reality, it can all be broken down to one thing, and that is this: injustice. That's what it can be broken down to. Because when you make the system as complicated as it is, then all of a sudden people are the casualties, and those who are caught in the web, they are the casualties. So you asked me why I wrote the book the way I did, simple, short chapters, because I wanted to get the point across.
I think it's very commendable. It's a very engaging story, and there's all sorts of threads to it, right? There's violence, there's the cockfighting, there's also a romance as well. Why did you choose to put the romance in?
Well, you know what? Even in the darkest situations, sometimes good things happen. But it took that romance, her getting behind him, this social worker, and I don't want to say too much because I'll spoil the book, but it took this social worker getting behind him as they fell in love and saying, well, this is wrong, and I'm going to do everything I can, whatever money it takes. I'm just a poor state social worker. And that is something that I feel is a commendable part of human existence. It is when someone says, look, this is a bad situation, but I'm going to do what I can to help somebody, to help my fellow man, or in this case, fellow teacher of the year, to help him get out of that situation is one of the most commendable parts of human existence. There is a bright side, but we have to get together and fight the dark side.
Yeah. I think that's very true. I think often people try to take on the burden of their own problems and become overwhelmed by them, right? But really, it is community, it is togetherness that makes things easier, right? It's
right. And you know, under the bridge, these guys loved each other.
Yeah, I mean, there is a real sense of community that you write there, which again is also very hopeful. That there's real care for each other. They all help each other, sort of both financially and practically. There's a scene sort of towards them, maybe just after halfway through, where all of the characters, where they begin looking into the Teacher of the Year's case. They all go to the library and do research into similar cases, into similar situations, and I think that was a really interesting choice narratively, right, for these characters to do that research themselves rather than to meet a lawyer and for that guy to explain everything to them. Why did you choose to write it that way, do you think?
I had to bring it down to human level. And you know, the funny part is one of my characters, a gentleman in the wheelchair, Amos, he's like, well, I'm not too bright. You know, I've got like a 6th grade education, but this just don't seem right. You know, this don't, a 6th grade education, this don't seem right. Well, if he's got a 6th grade education and it doesn't seem right, how do you think it feels to the rest of the people who can understand what's going on? But then they unfortunately just put it aside and they say, well, this is just too complicated for me to deal with. And my life is going okay, so why should I care?
Yeah. No, I think apathy, right? I think is a big problem with lots of problems we have in the world. It's someone else's problem, but if everything is someone else's problem, nothing ever gets fixed, right?
Yeah, what's this apathy? Well, I'm not sure if that's the answer, Scott, but I don't know and I don't care. What's the definition of apathy? You know, I don't know and I don't care, just as long as it doesn't affect me. Oh, and by the way, who's in the NCAA championships this week, or who's playing? You know, who's playing football? That's where people's minds are. In the meantime, underneath it all, there is an undercurrent of things that are happening, and this undercurrent, unfortunately, grabs people in its web, and until someone, like in my story, a Teacher of the Year is caught in its web, people, you know, they just go their ways and they don't even think about it.
I think everyone thinks it'll never happen to me, right? It won't happen to me or my family, kind of thing. But
right,
it's happening to someone in someone's family, right? So it's
yeah. Or they take this position. Well, they're caught in the system. They must have done something wrong.
Yeah.
And that's another thing in the system. Sometimes, like, you know, in the case, I'm not going to say too much because I don't want to spoil the book, but sometimes people do something that is wrong, but it's wrong on a different level than the charges they end up getting thrown against them. And in my book, one of the characters ends up getting charged with something that he shouldn't have been charged with. Was guilty of something, but wasn't guilty of what he was charged with.
I mean, that does feel like something that happens a lot, right? The impetus for sometimes for the police force is to find a culprit. It doesn't have to be the right one. It has to be you know, so they want to close the case rather than solve the case. I think is certainly in the UK as well. We have that quite a lot here. It's
right. It's just like that football game, you know, or what? It's like, well, our goal is to win whatever it takes. But you see, life isn't that. It's not a football game, a basketball. It's not like that. People are people. We're human beings. You know, if what is it? The greatest commandment is love. If you're supposed to love your neighbor, well, why would you be treating them this way? And people, it's all lip service people give to love and loving your neighbor, and the system and how people are treated. They just don't want to deal with it. But unfortunately, I think it is our duty to deal with it. So.
No, I mean, I think it's very common for, I think, everywhere in the world to talk about forgiveness being a very important thing to do. But yeah, the justice systems aren't built for forgiveness. They're built for the opposite.
They're built for the opposite. And the wild part is there's been in the news once in a while, not even once in a while, very common, you'll see, they went ahead and finally figured out that somebody was innocent. These people would have, they served 30 years in jail, 40 years in jail. Who's going to give them back those 30 years?
No, exactly.
Where's that going to come from, Scott? And how sad it is. How really sad. There's no accountability in the system when things go wrong. No. Okay. In fact, what's even more crazy is that there is immunity that is given to prosecutors, police officers, judges. And they justify this immunity by saying, if we don't have immunity, these people can't do their jobs. Well, my position is that if they did their jobs the way they're supposed to do them, there would be no need for immunity from prosecution. I envy you so much living in a place like England. I know you say, we every day we talk, this is bad. Let me tell you. So in order to resolve the situation in places like Florida and some other states, they enacted what's called stand your ground laws. I don't know if you've heard of them, but basically they've made it easier for everyone to have a gun. And now you can and they started this several years back, you can stand your ground. In other words, basically someone bothers you or gets you angry, you can stand your ground and shoot it out. It's like everything is going backwards in this country. I can't figure it out. Things that people used to talk about, how the Wild West was wrong and horrible, and there were gunfights at the OK Corral, and everywhere there were gunfights. Well, apparently some people decided they actually liked that, and so now everywhere there's shootings, killings. Everyone has a gun, and they've made it easier for everyone to obtain them, and they don't need tests or anything like that. Anybody can basically purchase a gun, even if you've just been released from the mental institution. It doesn't matter. You can read about it all the time. So the so-called freest country in the world has the most people in prison and the most killings and murders by far. Something is wrong there, Scott. Something has to change.
And do you think it's the same? The reason for the proliferation of guns is similar to the proliferation of prisoners. It's just money again at the end of the day. Is it that simple too, or
that's it? There you go. That's the common denominator once again, is money. A gun store can sell a lot of guns and make a lot of money. Human lives are just part of the situation. Well, it's sad that someone had to die, but hey, we made money selling our guns. And then welcome to Gun America. Welcome to America, where everybody can basically own a gun, and there's no No one looks into their back. Hardly, you're supposed to not sell guns to people who are felons, and felons aren't supposed to have guns. But how many cases are there that go on that I've handled of felons in possession of guns? You can get them at flea markets. You can get them almost anywhere. And different states have different laws. Some states are easier than others. But it's all very sad. But my book isn't about that.
Mm-hmm.
My book is about general injustice. Yeah. That, I guess, is for another day. Mm-hmm. A book on the ease of getting guns in this country.
And is that something that you feel has changed dramatically, isn't it? Or is more sort of a slow build?
It's dramatically gotten easier mm-hmm. to get guns. In fact, in the state of North Carolina, they basically passed a law that said gun shops now can do background tests or checks on people and sell them guns. Basically, no waiting period anymore. You see, people used to say, well, there needs to be a cool down period because some people who are out buying guns, they're angry at this or that or a specific situation. So you'd think that in order to address that, they'd have said, well, a cool down period, 30 days or so, mm-hmm. is important, even a few weeks. But instead, they've eliminated that cool down period. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how to explain it, but how evil can you get? Mm-hmm. How just plain greedy and evil can you be? But this is where we are right now. And you know what? As a human being, as a person, I'm not going to sit here and say nothing. Mm-hmm. I am going to speak out.
Right. No, I think that's an important thing to do. I think to not sit in silence, right? When you can see these things happening. Obviously, you've got you've got the skills and the experience to be able to hopefully to make a difference with that.
Well, to try and to mm-hmm. do my best to make it as God allows me. Mm-hmm. But I'll tell you, I don't think God is happy, right? I don't think generally people are doing what they're supposed to be doing. I don't think people are paying attention. Mm-hmm. And we've all got caught up in things that we should be paying attention to other things, and we're caught up in things that distract us. Mm-hmm. And this is why I believe I need to write. Mm-hmm. I need to talk. Somebody needs to say something. And if I don't do it while I'm alive, when am I going to mm-hmm. do it? When I'm dead? So I'm going to do it here now. I wrote that book because I think it can make a difference. What else are we doing while we're alive, Scott? Mm-hmm. How are we spending our time? Well, it's wonderful to have nice, expensive cars and watches and all the wonderful things that we look on as materialistic. And, I do have a very pretty wife, by the way. So that'll, who stands by me. But I want to tell you, what are we spending our time mm-hmm. doing? Yeah. And we've got to do more. Mm-hmm. We've got to do more.
Yeah. I think it's finding the things that matter, I think. And I think it's too easy in the world to focus on things that don't. I think often that's what we're encouraged to do, It's to
yeah. Life is short. Mm-hmm. And we've all got a ticket, mm-hmm. Scott. We've all got a ticket. One of these, we're all going to cash them in, and we're going to be in that great beyond. But until then, we've got to do the right thing, mm-hmm. because that is what we have to do as people, as humans. We have to do to help our fellow man and woman.
So you've been traveling around quite a lot, doing book signings and readings. How are you finding? Most of the people you're meeting, have they already read the book, or are they people who are meeting you and then buying the book?
Well, some people have heard of it, but I sell out or break records every single time. Indianapolis, they ordered so many books, we sold them out quickly. And Lexington, Kentucky, we just showed up. They said, well, we had books with us. They said, okay, because you had done so well in all of your previous, they let us in, and immediately we sold a record amount of books. Full was like almost 50 books, just sitting there for a few hours talking to people. People come up to us and they say, I tell them a little bit about the book. They look it up. They see the reviews, which are excellent. All across, they're excellent. And they say, this is a book I want to read. You know what, Scott? I hear people say, well, I wrote a book, and I wrote a book to entertain people, make them happy, make them laugh. Ha, ha, ha. Look at me, Scott. Look at me. I didn't write a book to entertain people. I think maybe they'll be entertained a little bit. I wrote a book to get a message across. Okay. I may have written it in an entertaining way to an extent, but I wrote a book to get the message across.
Great. Let's see what else is good too. We've touched on a lot of things I've got on my notes here. Do you want to read something from the book? Actually, that might be a nice thing to do. Have you been doing readings while you've been on the road, or not really?
I have. I had a reading in 3 weeks ago at I think it's Mama's Books. I'm sorry if I messed with the name of the bookstore, but I think it was Mama's Favorite Bookstore, and it was down in Hollywood, Florida. And once again, if I got the name wrong, forgive me. And I did a reading, and I played my banjo a little bit, and people went wild.
A few of the characters talk about being pressured to take plea deals for crimes they didn't commit, but sort of the advice from their legal representatives being to take to plead guilty for a lesser sentence. Is that something that genuinely happens a lot? People don't fight, and they instead admit to something that they didn't do.
90% of more than 90%, probably 95% of all cases are pled out. And the reason is that the prosecuting authorities, either the district attorney, state's attorney down in South Florida, district attorney, they call them here, or the U.S. attorney, if it's a U.S. case, will say this: okay, no problem. If you don't want to take the plea, we'll just go ahead, instead of dismissing charges, we'll add charges. You see, the hammer comes down all the time. And, you know, I started out of law school as a research assistant for what they called a circuit court judge down in South Florida. And he used to tell me, he used to say, Frank, Judge Salmon, you say, Frank, you know, he say, you're not supposed to be punished for exercising your constitutional rights. And then, you know, he kind of chuckled, and I chuckled, right? You're not supposed to be punished, but the way it works is they claim they're not punishing you, but what they'll do is they'll say, if you don't take this plea offer, we'll just add some more charges and we'll seek life in prison. It is, or a tremendous amount of time. It is an everyday occurrence in every criminal court I have ever practiced.
That's pretty scary. that's quite a scary thing to.
Once again, the people who are it's people who are caught in the system.
Do you have you encountered people who have had sort of the happy ending experience that Teach gets in your novel? Does that happen?
It happens. And of course, in my legal career, it happens. I've been in practice 38 years. I go to trial on cases. I've had I've had victories,
Mhm.
but in Teach's case, it was a victory.
Mhm.
But he paid for it.
Yeah.
He really paid for it, and in a sad way. But yeah, it happens, but not enough.
Mhm.
Not enough. And so, once again, caught in the system, people caught in the system.
Mhm.
You see, and this is the problem that exists. The adversary system is what we have. They call it the adversary. That was a word I was trying to think of almost the entire interview. It's an adversary system where both sides fight like a football game, but it shouldn't be an adversary system when people's lives are involved. We should all get together, defense and prosecute, say what is the right thing to do in a particular situation. And instead of stocking these jails and prisons with people, we should say these are human beings, not just money to be made. And we need to start acting the way that we should towards our fellow man.
Are there many claims, or not really at all, that the system as it exists benefits the victims of crime? Is that even used as a justification, or because I don't?
Yeah. What it does, it's funny. Victims of crime, real victims of crime who suffer, they might get some feeling of I guess the word is peace, knowing that someone who did something to them is going to be put away for a long time, depending upon the circumstances. But in the end, we have an obligation, not just to the victim,
Of course.
but to the people involved as well, because they are human beings too. We need to do the right thing. And even if that person has done something wrong, there needs to be just punishment. And that is key. Just punishment.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's all super interesting. I do think it's a very interesting book, and quite a unique way to explore these ideas. Really, it's because it's not quite allegory. It's not non-fiction. It's multiple there's multiple threads and narratives in there, and there's lots of interesting things to think about and to talk about and to research afterwards as well. I think it's thought provoking, I suppose, is a good phrase for it.
Well, I think I wrote a good book, and I think I wrote a good book. I think you like the book. If you like the book, I wrote a good book.
I find it very enjoyable. I think it's really readable. Is a good word for it. It's punchy. It's well paced. You got some jokes in there. You got some romance in there. You got excitement in there. You're sort of ticking all the boxes, right?
Well, thank you so much for this wonderful interview.
Absolutely.
I hope that we entertained some people, got some messages across, and basically made some points. And like I say, I wrote my book. It's more than just entertainment. Ha ha ha! Anybody can be an entertainer. Isn't that fun? I don't look at myself as an entertainer. I look at myself as doing something that I need to do, and that's to tell people the way things work.
No.
And
I think that's
make
make
a difference. Thank you so much.
That's impressive. But yeah, I mean, wonderful to meet you.
Wonderful.
Look forward to your next book too.
Well, thank you so much.